Alex, what's more sandbag, indoor grades or outdoor grades?
Oh, I feel like indoor grades for sure. Like, I
Really?
mean, it's easier. I think if you have better technique, like it's easier to climb harder outside.
Huh.
Like, if you think like even like bouldering, like I mean, you don't get V14s really inside. Like, you don't even get like you hardly get V12s. And, before the baby, even if I'm not like in really great shape, like for myself, I could still typically climb like a V12 in a session unless it was like some crazy weird thing like, but then my peak is usually like, upper end V14. So, um like there's times when I was like doing V13 like in a session or pretty quickly outside. And then but inside like V13 is I've only done a few kind of ever really inside or they don't really have that grade. Or you see Daniel Woods inside like falling on like V11 or V12 sometimes. Like and obviously he's so freaking strong. So it's it is interesting. I think the lower grades maybe it's just that I think it's different. I find that when I go inside, I have to have like a bit more strength or and I can tell because I'm like if my elbows are I've been having elbow tendonitis for quite a few years now on and off, but if I have to use more of my pulling muscles like inside, then my elbows are more irritated. And when I go outside, it's like skin dependent with the friction and then technique and different ways to do things. So like I don't have to use as much strength outside typically as I do in the gym.
Yeah, that's really such an interesting perspective because uh, for me, and I'm like a V5 climber. On the moon board, I've done a couple V5s, and mostly V4s.
Moonboard is
Moon board's really
hard.
hard.
Okay, moonboard is really
It's a
hard.
hard thing. I get it. And I'm mostly a sport climber, but outside, my experience at least is that the grades feel harder. Like when I go to the craft boulders or I went out to Leavenworth and I was like, like really struggling on some V3s and V4s. And so does that suggest, based on what you're saying there, that I'm just not as comfortable? Like it's like a technique thing, or do you think there's a point at which indoor grades become harder than outdoor grades? It's just like at the higher levels.
Yeah. Do you mainly sport climb
I do, yeah.
or do you both? So that could be part of it as well. So if you compare it to like sport climbing inside versus outside, like when you go to, do you find that you climb harder grades outside regularly or inside?
Harder grades outside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see? That just answered your question. Like if you climb harder, like I know a lot of sport climbers that are like usually sport climbers that are like purely sport climbers outside when they go in the gym, they're bouldering because they're like usually I feel like I'm lacking in power, then I need to like, up my power because if I'm not bouldering that much outside, I need to get it somewhere. Um, but a lot of my friends that are like really like avid just outdoor sport climbers, they'll come into the and they're climbing like 14 Bs, regularly like outside. They'll come inside and like, wow, 13A feels super
Hmm.
hard. And I don't have as much as experience like climbing sport outside yet, but even like the 514A that I one that I did do in Clear Creek and try like I did it really quickly. I think I did it second day on it and like the first day I just like numbed out. And it was like quite short, but like I find I don't know, sport climbers won't love this, but I find pure sport climbers usually like overgrade the cruxes in a route. They're like, oh, that's like a V whatever, that crux. And I remember they were saying like, oh, that's like a V10, 11 boulder problem on the crux of that 14A that I did. I'm like, it was like V7 or 8 max. Like,
Right.
I'm like, it's not like in boulders that get on these sport routes will be a little bit more like, that's not really like that hard of a boulder crux, like as you're saying.
All right, y'all, just a quick minute here to shout out today's sponsor, which is Scarpa. Oh, I'm so psyched. My very first pair of climbing shoes and approach shoes were by Scarpa, and I have loved them ever since. I'm so grateful that they're supporting the show here. Y'all, whether you are smearing granite like Amity Warm, towing into steep pockets like Maddie Hong, bouncing from volume to volume like Nathaniel Coleman, or tossing crazy heel hooks like Alex Puccio, Scarpa has got you. They have been making the best footwear for peak performance as well as sustainability since 1938. They are here to take care of your adventures. You can shop the entire collection at scarpa.com. Scarpa, no place too far. Let's get back to the video. Yeah, what about the notion of personal grades? And people have been talking about this recently as there's such different sizes of bodies, right? And a grade for somebody who's 5'1" versus somebody who's 6'3". You know, I had Kai Leitner on recently. I've got you on. You guys are quite a few, quite a bit different in height. If you guys both get on
Just
the
a
same
little.
boulder problem, it's going to feel very different. It might be very easy for one of you. It might be very challenging for one of you because of just the dimensions. So I don't know, where does the grading of things come? Where do you stand on that? I guess.
Yeah. So like I have when I was like in my, mid 20s when I started climbing outside more, I guess I was known for um trying to pick out climbs that were like deemed like the big boy climbs and like you have to be taller to
Hmm.
do. Um and because I never liked my height defining me and I always thought like, well, if I can't do it right now, I just need to get stronger. And so like when I did things like for example the buttermilker and bishop, when I did that, that was so hard for me because this one move in particular was really hard for me. And I fell on it for like 4 days until I did it. But then I did the swarm that same trip, and I did the swarm, which is like a harder grade. Like I think the buttermilk is V12. The swarm is like some people call V14. But I did the swarm in like 30 minutes, kind of twice. Like I fell in a jug at the top because it was wet, and then I like literally like a V1 jug, like or V0 jug. It was like wet because there was like ice melting off of it, and then I like threw my shoes off and almost walked to the car and had a little meltdown. And I came back and my friends there was like Nina Williams and my boyfriend at the time. They like cleaned off the last holds. They're like, no, you can try it again. You're so strong. It's like, and then I did it next try.
Amazing.
But I just remember that climb was like so much easier for me. And I'm like, well, like in my opinion, I was like, I called it V13. It definitely did not call it V14. And, at the time, if I was being really honest, I was like, I mean, there's V12s that were way harder for me.
Hmm.
And I just think like, and my boyfriend at the time, he was like almost 6 foot and like complete mesomorph as well, like really like muscular and so a lot heavier. But for him, like he had done the buttermilker years ago and that was easier for him. And I'm like, yeah, if you did this climb, like the swarm would probably be V14 for sure. Just because I'm a smaller person and like being a girl and lighter, like those crimps or that climb's gonna be easier for me. But I felt more rewarded when I did the buttermilker than I did the swarm, even though it was graded harder. And so like that's why I've never really, I don't know, I've never felt like I just wanted to go out and just find a climb that suited me, that's easier for me, and call it that harder grade. I remember my first V12 that I flashed, like I downgraded it to V11, and now it is a V11, but I was like, that's not, I think I was the first person to downgrade it. Like, that's definitely not like, you know, V V12. I can't take that as my first V12
Hmm.
flash. Like, doesn't feel right. Not that I would like try to go around sandbagging or making things seem harder, but I just wanted to be more honest with myself.